Amy was just a year old when her parents, Elise and Thomas, an ordinary couple from Belgium, noticed something strange. Every night when they tucked Amy into bed with them, it became a symphony of crying. She'd toss, turn, and wail for hours on end. But on the rare nights she slept in the guest room with their golden retriever, Pajo, she was silent, peaceful, not a peep. At first they chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe she was just having a growth spurt, or teething, or, who knows, babies are mysteries, right? But the pattern became impossible to ignore. With them, screaming, with the dog, silence. Eventually, they decided to let Amy sleep in that room more often. It felt weird, sure, but also wonderful. Finally, no more sleepless nights, no more pacing the floor in zombie mode at 3 a.m. And most importantly, they trusted Pajo. He'd been in the family for years, gentle, loyal, loving. But even with all that trust, there was a gnawing question they couldn't shake. What exactly was happening in that room? Elise couldn't get the thought out of her head. "Why does she sleep better with the dog than with us?" she asked Thomas one night, frowning over her tea. He just shrugged, but his eyes said the same thing. They were curious too. So they decided to find out. They bought a small night vision camera, installed it discreetly in the corner of the guest room, and hit record. The plan was simple. Let the camera run overnight and review the footage in the morning. That night, Amy went to bed like usual. Pajo followed her in, did his usual spin and flop onto the floor beside the crib, and the lights went out. The next morning felt normal, peaceful even. Elise sipped her coffee while Thomas made scrambled eggs. Amy sat in her high chair, babbling to herself, happy as ever. But then came the moment of truth. They loaded the footage onto their laptop and hit play. For a while, nothing happened. Just a baby sleeping, a dog snoring. Occasionally, Pajo's ears would twitch at a sound, or he'd lift his head when the boiler kicked in. At one point around 2 a.m., Thomas himself showed up on camera, bleary-eyed, making a midnight bathroom run. Then, at 4:10 a.m., everything changed. Amy stirred, then whimpered, then started to cry. Pajo jolted awake. At first he looked confused, ears perked, tail still. He stood, sniffed around the room, checked the crib, the floor, even the window. No intruder, no thunder, no reason to panic. But Amy was still crying. And that's when Pajo did something that made Elise's hand fly to her mouth. He rose up on his hind legs and gently placed his front paws on the edge of the crib. With careful precision, he nudged his head inside and began to lick Amy's face. Not frantically, tenderly, as if trying to tell her, "Hey, it's okay, I'm here." Amy quieted down, for a moment at least. But then the crying started again, louder this time, sharper. And this next part, this is where things crossed from sweet into unbelievable. Pajo turned and walked out of the room. Elise and Thomas leaned in closer, confused. If Amy kept crying, surely they would have woken up. But they hadn't heard a thing. Moments later, Pajo returned, with something dangling from his mouth. Amy's bottle. The dog had gone to the kitchen and fetched the baby's bottle. Elise gasped. Thomas dropped his coffee. On screen, they watched as Pajo carried the bottle over to the crib, stood up again, and, after a few clumsy attempts, nudged it into Amy's hands. A second later, the crying stopped. Amy was happily sucking on her bottle, and Pajo laid back down beside the crib like nothing had happened. Elise was in tears, not because something was wrong, but because it was so unexpectedly beautiful. Here was a dog, not a person, not a trained service animal, just a regular family pet who understood what their child needed and made it happen, all on his own. That night changed everything for Elise and Thomas. Of course, they continued letting Amy sleep with Pajo. In fact, they made it her official bedroom. But more than that, it changed how they saw their dog. He wasn't just a pet anymore. He was a protector, a caretaker, a big brother with paws. Elise later decided to share the video online. She posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Our dog surprised us last night and made me cry." Within days, it went viral. People from all over the world commented with love, awe, and their own stories of compassionate pets. But one comment in particular stood out. It was from a woman in the United States who said, "My golden retriever used to do the same thing when my son was a baby. He'd bring him toys and even once dragged a blanket over when he was cold. I never thought to film it, but I'm so glad you did." Elise read that comment out loud to Thomas, and both of them were quiet for a while. There was something powerful about knowing that their story had reminded others of love, of connection, of the silent loyalty that lives inside the animals we sometimes take for granted. The video now has millions of views, but beyond the numbers, what mattered most to Elise and Thomas was that the world had seen what they saw, that compassion doesn't always wear a human face. Sometimes it has fur and floppy ears and a wagging tail that says, "I've got you." Some bonds are born, others are chosen. But the most extraordinary ones, they're simply felt, day by day, moment by moment, and sometimes caught on camera.